morning. Thanks for joining us here on Local Voices, Different Perspectives. We're here in Tollcross Park. Beautiful, beautiful morning. Actually went a wee walk down Tollcross Road on the way here. So, absolutely stunning. It's always sunny when Local Voices is on. But I just want to do a wee introduction for John Mason's second interview. John was with us last week. John is the MSP for the SNP party for the local area. He was speaking last week about a variety of subjects, all of it within the framework of the changes that we see taking place in global society, but in our local community as well. John was talking about the role of an MSP at this time. He was talking about the role of an MSP in general, but in particular the role of an MSP at this time when so many people are feeling the impact of the lockdowns and the impact of the situation that we've been dealing with for the past 12 months. John was then talking about the impact itself and how it was felt by parents and how it's been felt by young people, families, and John kept returning to the issue of education at this time. So I thought it was a fantastic first interview, and John had that much to say and that much of value that we had to split into two parts. So without further ado, we're going to go into the second part of the interview. John's going to be talking about the Great Reset and the dynamic between the 1,000 wealthiest corporations and local businesses here in Tollcross Road. He's going to be talking about vaccinations, and right this second he's going to be talking about Covid passports. So without further ado, John Mason, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you. And I know the government this week are reviewing COVID passports, and another few interviews and also conversations I've had in the area. I think there's a concern with these COVID passports. It's okay, let's try and get back to normal, restaurants, pubs, cafes, but the idea is that you require a COVID passport in order to get yourself into things like that and things like gigs. Have you had local constituents contact you about that, or do you have an opinion on that, John?
Yes, I mean, I think that has been raised to some extent. I think the most likely one is for international travel.
Okay.
I think because that has been, all my life. I've, as you've travelled a lot, I know, and I've been in Africa, I've been in Asia.
Yeah.
And it was quite normal, and I just accepted it, that you had to get vaccinated for, say, yellow fever or typhoid.
Yep.
And you had to have a certificate which you showed when you went into the country. So I think it is fairly likely that a lot of countries will require that kind of thing, because there's definitely evidence that COVID we were getting on top of it to some extent, and then it's come back in, and largely that has come in from abroad. And countries like New Zealand and Taiwan have been very strict about their borders and have been quite successful at keeping it out. So I suspect for international travel, and we still don't know, Africa, Asia, what about the rest of Europe, I don't know, that there will be an expectation that people will have certificates. But some people can't have the vaccine, and so on and so forth. So the detail of that's to be worked out. And then I think even further down the line is the question of internally, would the organisers of a football match or a concert expect to see a certificate?
Yeah, I have seen, you brought that up, I have seen that, and there's a phrase as well, I heard it for the first time 2 weeks ago, no jab, no job. Do you feel that, this maybe represents a kind of, maybe an aspect of the new normal that we've been made aware of?
Well, I think some people are nervous about going down that route and much more of a kind of centralist approach. I think the NHS, for example, does have an expectation about what their staff will have had by ways of vaccines, and not just vaccines for that matter, but just general health and protection. Another shop or a factory would be a different thing. So I think the employer has a responsibility to look at health and safety for their staff. But we still don't know really, you see, when we've tried to get rid of other things, we've never got rid of flu, and I think we're kind of accepting that flu is going to carry on.
Yep.
and possibly even something like measles as well. That yes, we can vaccinate, but it will crop up from time to time.
Yeah.
And then we've got all the SARS kind of breakouts that we've had in Asia and things. So we don't really know yet which one COVID will be like. Will it be like flu, that it just carries on, changes a bit every year, and basically we all get a jag every year? Or will it be, could we eradicate it altogether?
So it remains to be seen. There's different reports about how effective the vaccines are. But the way I'm reading it, John, in terms of flu, like flu was for a vaccine which mainly aimed at the elderly, but you could have access to it. Young people as well would have their kind of nasal spray for the flu. But what the COVID vaccine represents is a vaccination for every man, woman and child. Which is a wee bit different, although the same. But you think it just remains to be seen the kind of severity of COVID, how we get out with a certain number of vaccinations, something like that?
Yes, I mean, I think, patience, I can't remember if we talked earlier or I mentioned it already today, but I mean, patience is not something most of us have. But, we need to have some patience. We just are still learning. We just don't know. I mean, even as I speak, and by the time people watch this, it may have changed. But as I speak, we are not sure if the vaccines are really stopping transmission, or they're just stopping people get the kind of main disease. And so that will be important as well. If it stops transmission, that will be great, and there's some evidence that it does. But some of these things you're raising, which and other people are raising them as well, both locally and wider, are questions we don't know the answers to yet.
That remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen. I know everybody wants certainty, and businesses want to know when they can open, people want to know when the kids go back to school, colleges, universities, including in the East End of Glasgow. But at the moment we just don't know some of these answers.
There are people who respectfully, will decline the vaccine, and perhaps that should be a choice. With regards to COVID passport, it might make participation in society more difficult, especially increasingly. Do you think that people who don't have a COVID passport should be excluded from certain spaces or certain aspects of public life?
I'm certainly uncomfortable with that. I have to say, when we were younger, we got vaccinated, and I don't think anyone asked us. We just got it, and that was accepted. And I think what we're hoping for, because all vaccines in this country are voluntary, and not every kid gets MMR or whatever the current ones are, and yet we have got effectively this thing, herd immunity, so that you don't need 100% vaccinated. I think it varies, but I mean, if you've got 80 or 90% vaccinated, it so brings down the transmissions that effectively it's gone, or almost gone. And that is my personal hope, that that's where we can get to. So we don't need to put pressure on people to get vaccinated. But it was interesting, I was at a meeting the other day, obviously on Zoom as usual, with a medic from Israel. So they're far ahead of us on vaccinating, but they have hit younger people and a certain amount of, call it resistance, call it hesitancy. And one of the things they have actually been saying to people, we will give you a passport so you can go to a concert if you get vaccinated. So they've kind of, in a sense, made it into a carrot rather than a stick. And they've had particular issues with Orthodox Jews and some of the Arab communities not wanting to get the vaccine. And the Orthodox Jews, for example, were offering a special meal according to their strict rules to encourage people to get the vaccine. So I think you can do a bit of chicken and egg. I mean, it's the same with voting. There's a lot less people vote than get the vaccine. And I always think, well, you should give people a voucher for a coffee or a glass of wine or something, and encourage them. The more we could do, let's be imaginative. But in the older age groups, there's no question. In the older age groups, the vaccination rates have been fabulous. They've been really, really high. And if people don't want to, I think people should have that freedom.
Should have that, right. Well, that's. I think there's 15 countries now implementing the COVID passports. Israel is one of them, and it's certainly the furthest along. So, we can keep an eye on that. It does seem strange how quickly things are changing. You know, you're going to be going about Tollcross Road, and if you haven't had the vaccine, then someone else needs to go and do your shopping for you. And I would be.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I do not see the co-op in Tollcross Road standing at the door checking if you've got a vaccine passport. I mean, I think, I don't think there's really any danger of that happening.
No, aye. Well, hopefully, John. Well, I just want to kind of tie your voice to other voices just now, John, because a consistent topic that's come up in 2 out of the 4 interviews, you've been the 4th, is the theme of the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum. I'm not sure how aware you are of the content coming out from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum regarding how we should expect society to change. Is that a topic that in your role you come across?
I mean, we touched a little on the way ahead coming out of COVID, the recovery, but I'm not particularly familiar with some of the things you've just been talking about.
No point. Well, maybe I'll give a wee description. So the Great Reset is an initiative set up by the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum is made up of the 1,000 wealthiest corporations on the planet, and what it is a pathway out of COVID on a global scale, wherein they're saying that the majority of people are going to be on some form of universal basic income globally. There's going to be through the reskilling revolution, there's going to be 1 billion human beings who are going to be reskilled, re-educated for more essential jobs. So it's like a global plan which will be implemented in every nation, every city, and every locality, and the governments of the world will be working to that blueprint. Have you been following that?
Okay, well, I mean, in a general sense, yes, I would be supportive of that, and I'm sure the Scottish and UK governments would as well. I still think one question is that we don't yet know how many of the changes are going to be permanent.
Yeah, okay.
So, for example, the obvious one is people working at home. Now, are people going to go back to offices?
At some point.
And if so, that affects the city centres and the town centres, because certainly in Glasgow, and a lot of people all round, and certainly including the East End, traditionally went into the city centre and did a job, and it might have been in an office, or it might have been in a shop where most of the customers were office workers, so that kind of thing. So there's quite a range in the city centre, and then the pubs and the restaurants fed off that, because after work people go into these places. Now, I think the jury is out, because we're hearing some companies say, yeah, we're going right back to work in the offices, but other companies are scaling back and saying, no, this is going to be permanent.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that affects the city centres and the town centres, and that could be a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I think the honest answer to that is we don't yet know, but I think we have to expect some changes and some changes in skills. I mean, in some cases it would just be the location changes. So, for example, if more people work at home in the East End of Glasgow, then we will have more cafes, restaurants, that kind of thing in the East End, and that would be quite a good thing. There's this idea of the 20-minute neighbourhood, that most services should be available within 20 minutes of your house. Of course, we've built up a railway system which is designed to get people into the city centre. So, I mean, there's going to be quite a challenge there if we don't have all these people going there. So how do we pay for the railways? But that's maybe a slightly separate question. But broadly speaking, yeah, we do need to look at doing things differently, but I think the jury, as I say, is still out as to... And frankly, it's very hard to predict. I mean, you can have these big plans as to where you'd like society to go, and I'd like society to be greener and fewer cars and better public transport and lots of things.
And it'll be a difficult one because, you know, reskilling 1 billion people doesn't sound like a lot if you say it fast. But that's quite a task, and the concern I have and the concern I've heard expressed is a wee bit like, okay, so the 1,000 wealthiest corporations have come together and they've thought of a kind of a plan. I've heard it said that universal basic income is the answer to the impending employment crisis. And I just wonder if there's enough variety of voices being in those decisions, and perhaps the people that have businesses in the Charing Cross Road would like to have a kind of say in that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on quite a few issues there. I mean, I think there's adaptation going on all the time because we have fewer. We've got McVitie's. We don't have a lot of big factories now in the East End as used to be the case. I mean, I'm a bit suspicious if it's the companies that are driving this agenda, because is that for the good of the individual ordinary person, or is that just for the good of the companies and their shareholders?
John, you raised some fantastic points there, and I really hope that when people hear this, they join in a discussion about that. I mean, my thing with it, and perhaps yourself, you touched on it there. I come from a local background, local guy. Much of my work is in the local area, and I work very much with local people, so I can keep my kind of finger in the pulse. You're the same, but in a different setting. And my concern is that these changes that are coming in with regards to the reskilling revolution and the kind of mass global universal basic income, is that the voice of the people that these decisions will most affect, I don't really see it either on the media, or do you feel like there's enough mechanisms for people that have businesses to then say, right, hold on a minute, or listen, the universal basic income should be this amount. How are we going to integrate the kind of people's voice in that debate?
So I strongly believe, and I'm in politics, to make Scotland a fairer society and to even things out, and whether it be through universal basic income or other methods, better universal credit, better housing, all of these things, minimum pay, we can make Scotland a more even, equal society, and I think that can be done.
It's almost like we're having to reflect upon this situation is making us reflect on, like, how did we arrive at this point in a lot of regards. And I would say, and I mean this honestly, like, that is for me the one true benefit of COVID, where we can all stop and we can look back and we can ask questions and perhaps try and reimagine a different world. I just hope that as all these changes are taking place, and as we are considering the planet as we rightly should, we should be, trying to give our attention to the kind of the local folk and the businesses and all that, and try and do the right thing for the planet, but do the right thing for humanity at the same time. I mentioned before about your role as an MP, and how you see yourself in the local area, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will have seen you on about. And I think MPs and MSPs are very much under the spotlight just now, especially in recent weeks. A lot of people suffering and have suffered for the last 12 months. And we can see in the newspapers this week the story of Matt Hancock and his PPE. And it came up in another couple of interviews, so I thought, if we're getting an MSP on, I'll be sure to ask him. What do you think about the kind of unlawful act of Matt Hancock, benefiting and his friends benefiting from the PPE? Do you feel that that's something that people are rightly angry about, or?
And then you bring that down to an individual, as you're saying, and we've had a number of cases throughout COVID where, including an MP near Glasgow, who travelled for their own personal benefit, to the possible detriment of the community. So I'm afraid, and as I was saying to somebody else, it was the same during the Second World War. When if you watch Dad's Army, even within that group, you've got the spiv, if that's the right word, who was operating the black market for his own benefit.
Yeah.
Now you could argue, well, there's a bit of a benefit to other people,
Aye.
and they get meat and things, but the point's still there that I think crisis like this, COVID, is an opportunity, as you've suggested, for us to rethink how things are done, in our own lives, but also in the community and around the world. However, there are certain people and certain kind of themes that carry on regardless. And we've seen some of the best in the community through COVID, people helping each other, and we've seen some of the worst of people just being totally selfish, lining their own pockets, whatever. I mean, at the beginning, I think they were selling masks for, is it £10 a time or something like that?
In terms of fear, different people in interviews have expressed fear about COVID passports, fear about their own job. A young musician scared that you're not going to be able to do gigs ever again. Some people concerned about the change in relationship between the state and the individual. Some people just concerned for their children. But in terms of how society is developing, do you have fears? I mean, what's a pessimistic scenario that you would not like to see come through?
Well, I have said that I have concerns about certain things, and that's true, and I could probably list you, we can do that, a few concerns that I have. However, fear is quite a strong word, and if we're going to be serious about it, as somebody with faith in God, and I believe in a God who loves me and us and the community, we don't need to fear, I would say. So, I do not need to fear what might happen to me tomorrow. I could spend my whole, I could think of all the horrible diseases I could have, or, I might not get elected at the next election or whatever. But I don't need to fear any of these things, ultimately. Things I'm concerned about, we've talked about the kind of loss of community, we've talked about the widening gap in education, the gap in wealth and income between those who have and have not. In this country, in this constituency, and around the world, and these greatly concern me, and I want to put a lot of effort into trying to tackle these things. We have long-standing health issues other than COVID. We have issues with obesity, we have issues with alcohol, we have drug deaths. I fear that we are not making enough progress on all of these things. So, there's people who, a lot of children young people are getting positive destinations when they leave school, but there's still a kind of core that are not. So, yes, these things greatly concern me, and that's what I'm in politics for.
Hope, take us forward, John, and provide a vision and articulate that vision with your voice for the future. Your most hopeful scenario coming out of this?
Well, hope's a very wide idea, and in the Bible it talks about faith, hope and love, and the greatest of these is love, and probably most of us would be comfortable with that, but hope's still very, very important. And for the individual, ultimately for the individual Christian believer, our hope is that Jesus is coming back one day and he's going to sort all of this out. But as I say, on the whole, I am positive, I am optimistic. I think there's so many strengths in the East End of Glasgow. Some people lack confidence, but people have a certain confidence that is healthy and is good, and I think people know that they're just as good as anyone else, and there is a kind of inner sense in Scotland of where we are all equal, and doesn't mean everyone lives in the same kind of house, but so when I think about these kind of things, I'm hopeful that we can make things better.
Well, John, thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to the discussion online, but I feel as though what John's done today is set an example for people of all kinds and from all walks of life in the community to give their voice, and for those voices to come together at this time. So that was John Mason giving us his time and his perspective. I thought that was fantastic. We're going to discuss the topics that John covered, but I want to start by thanking John. As I said in the previous video, I think John set a great example here. I think the changes that we're seeing taking place in society and the changes that are coming ahead, they're going to be felt by everyone. I don't think anyone's that naive to say otherwise. But for a local man and a local MSP to come on and give his voice and be prepared to share that and to facilitate a discussion around the changes that are on the way, I thought was absolutely fantastic. And I've known John now for a number of years. I've got to know him better as the years went on. And the reason why I contacted him and asked John is because I see him as a man of character, and I knew that he would say yes, and in a way I did. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, because of the kind of climate around discussion and dialogue at this time. So I thought that was fantastic for John to come on, and it was really appreciated. So let's dig into the topics that John was talking about. John was first of all talking about COVID passports. At the time that John was talking, he was expressing how the COVID passports made him feel slightly uncomfortable, but also he thought at that time that it was just for international travel. So since the interview took place, Boris Johnson's confirmed that there will in fact be pilots starting almost immediately for COVID passports, and these will be in pubs, clubs, music venues, places like that. So immediately it's not just about international travel. But interestingly, even if it were about international travel, you still wouldn't be able to travel. So it would appear that jab and go is a no-go. So it'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts on that. But with regard to the COVID passports themselves, John was saying that it would make him feel uncomfortable, and I laid out a scenario whereby I would be walking along Tollcross Road and perhaps trying to enter the Tollcross Co-op, at which point I may be refused entry because I haven't had a COVID vaccination. John seemed quite surprised at that, and it's almost as if such a scenario wouldn't happen, but were it to happen, it would make him feel very uncomfortable. So a candid reply, and I appreciate that from John. But what do you think? Would that make you feel uncomfortable? I put some information on there about concerns around a two-tier society developing, wherein some people can interact fully with other human beings and with society in general and can access certain services, and some people can't. So what do we think about this? What do you think about that? Does that make you feel uncomfortable? Is such a development necessary? And if it is necessary, then, please articulate that. And it'd be wonderful to hear people's opinions with regards to perhaps why they felt COVID passports was a proportionate measure and a proportionate development in our society. I'd like to bring a perspective of my own at this time, and you can classify it as my own opinion. I find interesting parallels between the COVID passports and the Chinese social credit system. If you're not aware, the Chinese social credit system is a thing in China. It's a digital framework wherein the activities of the population are monitored, tracked, recorded, and as they're recorded, it'll affect your score, your social credit score, a bit like a financial, your credit rating, which we're quite used to, but a social credit rating. And if you were to behave in a way that the state thinks isn't advisable or appropriate, then you would have certain restrictions placed upon your freedom. So my concern that I would like to raise is that the COVID passport is a step towards a form of Chinese social credit system. So I think an initial step might be the passport, the vaccine passport, and it being about the vaccine. However, once this framework comes in and once you implement this digital infrastructure, and you make it an aspect of society. My concern is that it wouldn't stop at just the vaccine passport, and that it might develop from there, you know. So I'd be interested in people's perspectives on that, the parallel between the implementation of a digital framework around COVID passports and the digital framework that is the Chinese social credit system. So your thoughts on that would be really welcome. And also your thoughts around the vaccinations themselves, or even the vaccine passports. Would the mandate of a vaccine passport, or would the mandate of a vaccine itself be a violation of human rights? Would it be a violation of the Nuremberg Code with regards to experimental medical procedures? And would it be a violation of the Nuremberg Code with regard to informed consent and requiring the consent of the individual human being? So it'd be wonderful to open that up as a discussion. I understand it's quite a sensitive topic, however, it is one that affects us all. And it'd be wonderful if we could start a conversation around that. John was also speaking about the Great Reset, and it appeared to be language that was quite new to John. I don't doubt that he was familiar with the concepts behind it. But the Great Reset, is that a new concept for yourself? Have you heard it before? Have you been on the home pages of the World Economic Forum, United Nations, bodies like that? And have you kind of brushed up on it? And what's your opinion on it? In the discussion that John covered, we were talking about the dynamic between the 1,000 wealthiest corporations and local communities. And I'd like to open up the discussion around that very thing, the dynamic here. Is it appropriate for the 1,000 wealthiest corporations to come together and decide that certain sectors will develop and certain sectors will be in decline? It would appear that things like artificial intelligence and digital framework maintenance, these things are going to develop, and there will be jobs and there will be expansion into the area of technology and into the area of artificial intelligence, and there'll be less development in sectors which traditionally involve human beings and human interaction and duties and responsibilities for human beings. So what would people's opinions be on that, about this change? The changes themselves, but in the dynamic also, it'd be wonderful to hear people describe what they felt the proper dynamic should be with regards to how they can live their lives and how society is shaped. So I thought it was wonderful for John to pass comment on that. I feel like it's a very topical issue, and it's one that we'll be seeing more of as things develop. So if you wanted to comment on the notion of some jobs being essential and some jobs not, who decides? Who decides the essential jobs? Who decides the essential items? Who decides what's essential? And what do you think about that? What should be the proper dynamic? What should be the proper role of each human being in making decisions for themselves, for their business, and for their local community? Finally, John spoke about Matt Hancock. Well, he was invited to speak about PPE and Matt Hancock. I couldn't resist. I thought if we're going to have an MSP on, that it might be nice to ask him about the behaviour of another government official. And John was kind enough to reply. And as I said before, I expected John would. I don't see him as an individual that shies away from certain topics. He speaks his mind, and he speaks with sincerity. So I thought that was great for him to actually give a response on that, because you're not always guaranteed. So John was given the perspective that to some extent it was human nature, what Matt Hancock did. However, he did express that certain government officials are under the spotlight, and they should be perhaps held to task greater. So the situation was, Matt Hancock awarded a contract to one of his buddies, and to the sum of millions of pounds, in excess of £14 million. What do we think of that? I think it's amazing that so many people are suffering, and so many businesses are closing. Sometimes you walk down the road and you wonder what businesses are going to make it to the other side, but some people are doing okay. And it would seem at this stage a wee bit like it's a similar story to different crises which happened in the past, the banking credit crunch, and the displacement of wealth that occurs at times of great fear and confusion, and the dynamic between the very wealthy and the very powerful, and those at the bottom. That dynamic appears to change, and wealth seems to go from here to there. We can see parts of that developing just now, I feel, and I think it's maybe something we should be aware of, or something that we should talk about. But what do you think about the whole PPE thing in Matt Hancock's contract, and do you think that he was disciplined enough? Do you think that perhaps he was held to task for this? And if it was deemed to be an unlawful act, then what should be the appropriate form of discipline for this individual in this position? So, that was John Mason speaking on a variety of subjects. I think you've got a lot to get your teeth into. You've got the Great Reset and the impact in this local area and in local communities in general, the proper dynamic between the wealthiest corporations and human beings in local communities. We've got COVID passports to talk about and the vaccinations themselves. So thanks very much to John for speaking on all those subjects. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to the discussion and seeing you next time on Local Voices, Different Perspectives. Thank you.